love it all. I got a lot of work. And that is really what trade's all about. You getting mutual benefit. But you have to have rules. It has to be fair. People can't cheat in their trading. And that's what we try to do also in economic diplomacy, is make sure there's a level playing field. That entails is anything to do with economics, where the United States has an interest in where you have to interact with other governments. And so that covers trade, it covers investment in other countries, it covers agreements on such things as international rules for telecommunications or aviation. It can include sanctions and applying sanctions and monitoring sanctions and deciding when to lift sanctions if you put them in place.
Together, along with our allies, we are right now enforcing powerful economic sanctions. We're cutting off Russia's largest banks in the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble, making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless. We're choking Russia's access.
The biggest change in economic diplomacy has been the addition of a number of areas where you really have to know what's in the interest of the United States and interact with other countries, other governments, sometimes negotiating broader accords, for example, on ideas of the use of, let's say, data. And should data be protected? What can be exchanged? What are the safeguards you have for privacy? That didn't exist, of course, before we had the internet. And then everything to do with the internet. Even when we negotiated our North America Free Trade Agreement in the early 1990s, the internet barely existed. So what's happened is that what was traditionally economic diplomacy has expanded in the area of knowledge that the officers working on that have to be expert in, and the number of companies that you're dealing with, the number of different parts of the economy and the lives of people that you touch, both in the United States and around the world. But certainly the digitalization of so many things has allowed much more efficiency, much more speed, but it also has made things very complex because we have to react immediately too. When something happens, you're expected to respond very quickly. Whereas when I went to my first post overseas, for example, in Morocco, it would take a while to call even back to the United States, let alone to send a report back, even electronically. It was just a much slower pace of diplomacy than you have today. Well, I think I'd say the biggest misconception among Americans that I've found is they don't know how important trade is and economic diplomacy is to their daily lives. For example, there are over 40 million jobs in the United States supported by trade. These are the jobs in the companies that actually make services or the technology or the cars or the computers that go elsewhere. But there are also those jobs which tend to be better paying than other jobs in the United States, actually support all sorts of other jobs in the community. So what's really clear is if you have a company that exports a lot, you have all those people also spending money in the community that supports other jobs. So just one little example involving our neighbor to the south, Mexico. When we started the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was the first big trade agreement that we, as the United States, were involved in, there were about 700,000 American jobs supported by trade with Mexico. By 2019, it was 7 times as many jobs. 4.9 million jobs were supported by trade with Mexico. As companies, not governments, companies built relationships with each other and started trading things. And it's not only things that you build, the two largest export markets for farmers in the United States are Mexico and Canada. They buy the most agricultural products. So it really touches a whole range of our society. And most people don't know that. They don't know how their community is affected by trade. Sometimes good and sometimes, less good. That's for sure. Where the problems did come up in trade is where other countries, and China being the largest example, actually didn't play fairly, to say it honestly. They would take intellectual property and copy it from the United States. They wouldn't let U.S. companies freely invest in their own country in a fair way. They would subsidize their own companies with billions of dollars in ways that we don't do in the United States. And that created problems too. So that's something that trade policy, that economic diplomacy should definitely be working on. Let's say we have a company that sells wonderful widgets, and they sell some of these to 10 countries, but as we talk to them, they think they could really sell to these 5 other countries if these certain restrictions were not there on imports, or if they were the quality of their product was actually fairly judged by their regulators. So then the United States diplomats will go in and they will try to fix those regulations to get agreements so that this company can sell its widgets to that country in that market. And that's expanding the export markets for this company. And if we can do that, then that's good for the company, it's good for the people that work for them, it's good for the communities where they work. So that's part of what you try to do in commercial diplomacy. Well, let me give one particular example. In Mexico, when I was there were a number of their regulations on washing machines and other large appliances that really limited the ability for them to import these things made by U.S. companies. And so what we did is we went in and talked to their agency, their commerce ministries that were in charge of these regulations. We got them to agree to have the experts from the United States come and to work out a set of understandings so the regulations were more compatible. That allowed more exports into that country. That's one example. Well, I do think we have a number of different models of the world sort of clashing with each other right now. We thought until recently that the main rival was China, and we could look at the next 5, 10, 20 years, and that's what we needed to think about. We certainly do need to think about it, but we're reminded that there's some old adversaries out there that still have nuclear weapons, and they're going to remind us that the jungle is still alive as they try to eat up one of their neighbors, right? And so we have to prepare for both of those. Now, with China, I think it is correct. We have to be smart about what we're doing with our own economy, how we're investing at home. We do have to be strong at home in order to be strong internationally, and that's true on the economic side as well. And it does also mean that we have to do all we can to have a strong international economic order that, to the degree we can, is still integrated. I mean, the best outcome of all of this would be that we also have agreements with China on best practices in trade and economics, and that we find a way to coexist together. Maybe we won't get there. Maybe we are going to end up having a couple of different economic systems and information systems in the world. I think the world would lose in that situation, but that might be the way that it ends up. So we need to do our best to keep building up that network that is the United States and its close partners, and then bringing as many of the rest of the world in and having them see the value of being in that system. I think that the Chinese really want to have a prosperous world because they think they can prosper in that world. And so if we can convince them, in a sense, to steer back toward a world where we're all interacting with a set of rules. That will be good. If we can't, then we have to make as big a space as possible where there are clear rules. People can interact, can trade, can build, can exchange with each other, and still prosper. And that's going to take very, very good, thoughtful economic diplomacy as we go forward.